Today we're going to be talking about essential work. Before we get started, I want a couple of preliminaries for you to help you out. My name is David Orr. I'm the director here at the Cornell Local Roads program. And we have a bunch of people to help us out. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see some icons when you scroll down there to raise your hand or to do a Q&A. We're only using the Q&A function today, so please type your question into the Q&A. We are also on Facebook Live, so for those of you on Facebook joining us, thank you very much. You can also put questions in there, and our staff will bring those questions over to me so I see them in the Q&A. We have a whole bunch of folks joining us. There were several others who wanted to join us but were not able to, but this morning we have John Papponetti from Orleans County, Rich Benjamin from the town of Thompson, Jamie Dussing from the town of Clarence, Rob Fitch from the New York State Department of Transportation, Dan Crandell with Schoharie County, Trish Czachor, who is representing the county highway superintendents, and we'll take the items that we've got back to that association to spread the word. Joel Kai with the Town Superintendents Association and also the town of Dickinson, and John Mancini with the New York Conference of Mayors. I want to thank all of them for joining us, and we'll just get right into it with some of the questions that both we've been sent and we had sent out ahead of time. So one of the questions that came up and has been asked of us, and so we'll ask everybody else, what extra personal protective equipment are you supplying to your crews?
David, I can take that if you want. This is Jamie.
Sure, go ahead, Jamie.
I think really, the word extra, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but the standard precautions, masks, gloves certainly provided. We have a full complement of cleaning supplies and disinfectants, and we're buying more by the day, trying to enhance what we already have. These were little bags that we put together and gave to our employees. There's just a couple N95 masks in there, some gloves, and a little tip sheet, just for them to keep. But that's what we issued everybody to make sure they had, kind of a baseline of supplies for the week. But we certainly will issue more as they need them. So we're trying to give them what they need to essentially help us out to get the job done.
Okay, thank you.
Dave,
anybody else?
One of the other things that this is John, that we've added on top of what Jamie already showed is we provided all of our employees with the little New York State hand sanitizer bottles as well, that they can keep on them at all times, throughout the day.
Okay. I haven't seen little ones yet. I'd love to get those. I've only seen the big bottles.
They're hard to come by. We happened to get a shipment in just shortly after we got the big 1-gallon jugs in.
See if you can get yourself a little bottle like this.
Yep, that's pretty much what they are.
Yeah, so you can find these. I got this one actually at a grocery store, so it's filled with water.
If I could just add, the governor's executive order last week, which probably everyone's familiar with, regarding providing face coverings to individuals, employees that may come in contact with the public. There was some question initially when that verbiage was issued whether it applied to the public sector. Department of Labor subsequently came out with a guidance document, public guidance document, that it does indeed apply to all public employers, so that if your employees are going to be in contact with the public, social distancing, etc., management is required now to provide face coverings to all employees. It's a required mandate.
Okay. So
hey,
Rob
David,
go ahead.
David, if I could add on the DOT side, we've been trying to get our folks, the similar PPE that everyone else has been given to their folks all along. Our face masks consisted primarily of N95 respirators going into this event. Department of Health guidance is now that N95 respirators should be preserved for medical use only. So we've really been transitioning away from N95s into a more unrated mask, like a surgical mask type deal. So we've got some disposable masks we've given to our staff in the interim, but we've also reached out and done a significant purchase of cloth reusable masks to give to our folks, because we do believe we're going to be in this for the long haul. So we want to have something that's a bit more sustainable.
Okay.
Dave, from Schoharie. We started out with the N95s, and we've transitioned to surgicals and now to cloth also. But one of the things that we've done that's been helpful in our shop, our main facility, we're using the road marking reflective yellow tape, and we put 6-foot boxes around our time clocks and put striping from one end of the shop to the other, with the stripes 6 foot apart and 6 foot long, just to give the guys a better idea and as a reminder. That's helpful too.
Okay. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll move on to our next question.
Just one thing I'll add, as far as the PPE that was given to the employees, we also, went over the tech tip, workplace hygiene. We didn't really want to group up, but we kept some distance the other day. Everybody has to wear masks in the shop. We had a quick tailgate talk. Actually, it's a tailgate talk on the Cornell website. We actually printed that off, went right through it, washing hands, general hygiene. So in addition to the PPE, we're also, having good discussions on what we should be doing to keep everybody safe.
Yep, good idea. So what are the primary concerns of your employees that you're hearing about as they're working with the highway work that we're trying to get done?
I'll start with that one. A lot of my guys are concerned just in general about their health. We have several of my crew that are, in their, late 50s, 60s, some with, health concerns. So they're very, very concerned with, getting, the virus and what can transpire there. I think, the other big concern is just the unknown. Everybody's afraid right now. They don't know what to expect moving forward. They're very nervous about how this is going to affect them, whether they might be laid off, due to, the downturn of the economy. So those are some of the immediate concerns that I'm seeing at this point.
Okay.
Hey, David, if I could add, on the state side, again, our biggest concern for our employees is their health and their well-being. But something that we found is, as this virus is progressing its way through the state, starting in the lower Hudson Valley, and then we begin to see another location of the state. We've seen this transition of how our employees respond. Initially it's there's a lot of fear and concern, but what we've learned is through good communication, information sharing, open communication. The staff can really get educated and find a comfort level, if you can imagine that, with this whole process. Our folks in the lower Hudson Valley that have been dealing with this for several weeks, they've established this battle rhythm, and they have a bit more of a comfort with the daily practices that we have to do as far as the social distancing and all the cleaning and the hand washing, whereas some of our outer regions out west in the western part of the state and up north, they're still going through that phase.
Okay, good answer. John, what are the villages? What are you hearing from them?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of exactly what's already been stated. My background is I deal in the labor relations side of things for our members, and layoffs, the downturn of the economy, I think is having a very significant impact on employees. And one of the things that I would just mention too, and it's starting to get a little play, but I think it's going to be an even bigger issue, is the mental health aspect of what we're going through. I mean, it's not just, even though we may have a job and our employees in the public sector, remembering that school kids are home, we're trying to homeschool, our spouse may be out of work. I think there's a lot of mental health issues that are going to pop up as a result. And I think as employers, we just got to keep an extra eye out on our employees and make sure they're doing all right, and look for that support network.
Yeah, that's a good point. Family members, both home and away. I've got a brother who works in the travel industry, which obviously has been decimated. So yeah, that's a very good point to be raised. John, Joel, what are you hearing from the town superintendents across the state? He's trying to unmute himself. I know he can.
There we go.
There you go.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry. The question again.
So what are the primary concerns you're hearing from the towns around the state?
The biggest issues that we're getting right now, and we're going to address this afternoon for anybody who wants to sign in, it's at 1:00, is really CHIPS funding, whether or not it's going to be affected. And we're seeing a lot of people either canceling work or not starting work because of the fear factor of whether or not the funds are going to be there or not.
Okay, so that's good. So we're going to move to the next question, but I just want to remind folks that we do have the question and answer pod. You can also Facebook Live if you're joining us from there. So we have some questions that have come in. I'll put one of them up now because it sort of follows in with the concerns of your employees. And someone wanted to know, is there a justification for a town board to shut down a highway department at this time? So any feedback on that from our panelists?
If you want, obviously in a perfect world, the relationship between a town board or a county board and the highway superintendent should be great, and they should work together. I know that doesn't happen all the time, but I think once these state of emergencies are declared is where the question comes in. And I don't have a perfect answer. My guess is that once the state of emergency is declared, the supervisor has additional powers that he may not have on a typical day-to-day. That's my gut feeling.
Okay. Rich, what are they doing down the Sullivan County way with regards to departments being open or closed?
All the highway departments are open. The Sullivan County last week laid off 77 employees until they said until July they would review it. The supervisor's emergency orders are only good for 5 days, I believe. I think they have to renew them. So if the supervisor's trying to completely shut down the highway department, that would seem a little unreasonable, probably. And the other thing, a question is the governor's original executive order that to limit our employees said that the employees that were sent home, and whether they work from home or not, would not accrue time off. So I hear a lot of things from around the state where everybody wants to furlough, and so as long as wouldn't it be as long as the governor's executive order is enforced that employees would have to be paid? Does anybody know the answer to that one?
That's a good question. I'm not sure anybody really knows the answer. We may find out.
Yeah, it was very clear in the original executive order that the local government employees that were sent home to work at home, whether they worked at home or not, it says, I think the language would not, have to use their accruals, which would mean that they wouldn't have to use their own time and they would be paid. So that's something we could look into, I guess.
Yeah, I think that was the initial intent. I think what's happening now is, and it's happening in my county, at the county level, is we're moving away from people being at home, especially essential employees. We've had essential employees basically working from home and or sitting at home on call, being wait to call in, available to work. But now our county's moving to temporary, voluntarily temporary layoffs, where we have people volunteer to be laid off for the next 90 days. As a measure of saving money, knowing that sales tax revenue is projected to come way down. Here in Orleans County, we're projecting to lose anywhere between $1.1 and $2 million in sales tax revenue and other state aid. Listening to the governor's little conference call or speech session last night after he met with the president, now he's talking about a 20% cut across the board, which before he was targeting maybe certain areas. Now it looks like it's a 20% across the board. So I think the reactions that are taking place with some of these municipalities is they're trying to prepare for, not to be too dramatic, but Armageddon when it comes to being able to balance budgets at the end of the year.
So, John, do you have anything from the village side?
Yeah, I agree with what John and Rich said wholeheartedly. The original executive order where it mentioned the fact that, take leave without accruals for non-essentials who couldn't, who should be working from home, or even if you couldn't work from home, created a lot of confusion. There certainly was a body of folks who believe and still do that the intent of the governor was that it would be paid leave. Unfortunately, without accrual, so it left a little wiggle room for interpretation in that regard, because there's another group of folks who don't believe that to be the case, and of course they raise the issue of the prohibition against unconstitutional gifting of public monies, and the argument out there is that if someone is home and not doing anything because the nature of their work they can't, how can we legally pay them without violating the state constitution, which is why many places have them on on-call status, right? So, and I think we talked about it in a previous call that, if there's an emergency, there's an expectation that they're on call, ready, willing, and able to respond during their normal work hours, and there is value to that. There's value to the local government to be able to know that your workforce will be there if you need it. So I think that clears any hurdles from that aspect.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the next question, but certainly some issues that we need to think about. And yes, I'm seeing the questions come in the Q&A, and I'll get back to those. So we're talking about essential work, but we put out a tech tip that talked about critical work, because everything we're doing is technically essential. But is there critical work that you're not being able to accomplish within your own organization?
We have in the town of Clarence, there's certain things that we can't do, such as street sweeping, just because we're currently operating at 50%, and all our efforts are basically doing spring cleanup and brush cleanup and things like that. We'd love to get out and sweep the roads. There's probably a half a dozen other things that we typically do this time of year that we're not able to get to just because we are operating with half the people.
And I would also add to that, we've got some catch basins and stuff like that that are in dire need of repairs and or need to be backed out from debris in it. And it's impossible to do that with one person. You would need two people together to do that. And so those right now are currently being suspended until the ban is lifted.
I had somebody call last week and basically say that the street sweeping was a health issue, and they're not too far off. It's kind of far-fetched. We'd like all the streets to be swept, but just an impossibility, and that's just the way it is. So everybody's got a little a different point of view of how critical or essential it is, and it just depends on who you are.
Hey, David, on the DOT side, we're not letting any critical work not be accomplished. Even though we have our staffing reductions, we will bring in additional staff as we need to complement a crew so we can do critical work. Our goal is to not violate social distancing protocols, but we realize that there's going to be times when we have to do that in order to perform some of this critical work. So, we provide our folks with masks, and we try and limit the amount of time that we're within our 6-foot radius, but we will do that in order to perform critical work. I think the other component of this is all of our essential work will eventually become critical if we wait long enough. So I think it's really incumbent upon everybody to really look at your operation and look at how we can transition into some revised work hours to get our summer work done. Because I think all agencies are going to, or all municipalities are going to start really feeling the hurt here if we don't try and transition into a summer work program fairly soon.
So Rob, a follow-up on the issue. We know there's some critical work that you've got to do where you're going to violate the social distancing rules and you're going to have to be closer than 6 feet. We already asked about extra PPEs, but are you going to do extra precautions while they're doing those activities where they can't maintain the 6-foot social distancing?
For instance, I mean, I guess, what we would do is, we make sure everybody has a mask, and we're not just making it available, we're making it mandatory. You have to wear a mask when you're violating that protocol. We're making sure everyone is following, proper hand washing and hand etiquette and cough etiquette and all those things. What other items were you thinking about, David, when you mentioned that question?
Well, the things we've seen some folks do is getting face shields for folks, or having extra cleaning precautions before and after, things of that ilk.
Yeah, we haven't really discussed the face shield, honestly, but I mean, with our hard hat, a little difficult to wear face shields, but certainly that's something that we would entertain. Enhanced cleaning is something that we definitely do. We require all of our equipment, our light duty fleet, and our medium and heavy duty fleet to be cleaned at the beginning and at the end of every shift. And if there's a driver change during the shift, it needs to get cleaned at that point as well. So we definitely have enhanced cleaning, along with enhanced attention to vehicle occupancy. We prefer not to have more than one person in a vehicle. If the vehicle has multiple rows of seating, we allow 2 people in the vehicle. Everyone will be given a mask at that point to wear. But understanding there will be times where we may need to violate that if it's an emergency. We're prepared to do that, and at that point, those are the times when we just have to be as extra cautious as possible and to really minimize those times.
David, some of the things that are the biggest concerns I see are really at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. I feel fairly comfortable with the level of threat there is once the guys are out, or the employees are out on the road. They've all been assigned a vehicle, no riders. They have their PPE. And essentially, they're whether you're driving that dump truck, you're assigned that in the morning, and that's yours all day. They're encouraged to disinfect as the day goes on. Obviously, when we switch operators, a higher level of disinfection will take place. But I feel fairly comfortable once they're out on the road. It's really just that whole parking, punching in, getting your job orders and going out on the road. We have guys that like to come in a half hour before their shift and drink coffee and shoot the breeze. We've told them to please come in, at 7 o'clock. And at the end of the day, where there's typically kind of a lineup at the time clock, we're sending them out the door. So we don't want anybody stacking up. But I'm fairly comfortable with once they're out on the road. They're no more at risk than they would be raking leaves in their backyard or something like that. That's the way I feel about it. But we were just taking all the precautions we can, and following through, I think, is the biggest thing. If we say you got to wear a mask in the shop, you better be wearing a mask in the shop, and try to practice what we preach.
Okay.
Hey, Jamie.
Yes, sir.
We just stopped using our time clock. We just keep track in the office so that we don't have that group in the morning and the afternoon. Especially in the afternoon, they all group up by the clock. So we just stopped using the time clock for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, we essentially have 3 ways of keeping track. One manual on a daily sheet. There's the digital punching in every day, and it's also tracked in the computer once it's entered from the daily sheet. So there's several ways to track it, and really, in the big picture, punching in is not a necessary task. It can be avoided. Our town hall and the bookkeepers really would like us to punch in because it's an added level of protection for them, but it's really not necessary at this point.
No.
John, what are the villages doing in that respect?
Same thing, moving forward with that, and I agree. I think during this time, I get it from a checks and balances standpoint, where town hall may want you to do the punch-ins, but if you have other mechanisms to be able to track people's time and records from an auditing standpoint, that I think that's what an auditor would be looking for. That sounds totally reasonable.
So a question came in that I think is a good one that follows on to this. Someone wants to know where they can get their PPE if they're having a hard time getting it. So where are folks getting their cleaning, face mask, all that stuff?
Dave,
I would go right through your emergency management office.
I was going to say.
They're the ones that are coordinating at the state level to get the supplies needed for municipalities and nursing homes and other critical businesses within the communities.
And we were told that it's important to go through the county as well, emergency management folks, so they can track what's being used, so we have a better sense of what the needs and demands are.
That's true. We've been told the same thing for that reason. And if we do have to get things that the emergency services office for the county doesn't have, we have to get approval from, we have like a COVID team we set up for the county and get approval from that team and fill out a form just to make sure it's properly logged. But when the first couple of weeks, most of the emergency services for the counties were a little short on supplies, and we outsourced purchase. But since then, they're pretty well stocked. We had a conference call earlier this morning, and the state and the feds have gotten out quite a few more supplies to everybody. So I think everybody's getting pretty well stocked now.
The big answer there is emergency services, and but I also think that everybody is asking for more than they actually need, and that could, create a shortage down the road. I mean, I know we've all heard that in the news, but I suggest several sources. Those chemical guys that drive you crazy sometimes throughout the year. A lot of those have turned out to be valuable resources now. So they're maybe just another name in your Rolodex, but we've taken advantage of that. I had to explain to one of the girls in the office yesterday when she actually looked at the price of some disinfectant wipes. And it's the same thing we would get for about $3 for a typical tube of Clorox wipes are, up in the $10 range now. I guess that's a battle for another day, but I am assuming there is some level of gouging or opportunist sales going on, and I think you're going to see more of that. And it's a shame, but from the prices we compared yesterday, it's happening, no doubt.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of emails from a lot of different these chemical companies and distributors and stuff that you normally wouldn't see, but they're across the United States, and they're reaching out. They're getting our contact information from some listserv somewhere, but they're reaching out and offering, next day delivery. We got plenty of, inventory, whatever you need, call us up type thing. So you might have to go outside the normal distributors that you're used to dealing with to really get the products that you need for, PPE, disinfecting, cleaning, whatever it may be.
Yep. And a comment came in via the question and answer to not forget those people like the uniform companies and the first aid suppliers. But I would say to anybody listening, even if you get those things from those folks, let the county emergency management folks know you've done that. Again, we want to track what's being used so that we're prepared for any changes that come along into the future. So we'll go to our next question. There are some new CDC guidelines for critical infrastructure workers, especially those who may have been exposed to COVID-19. So has anybody implemented any of those new guidelines? And if so, what are your concerns or issues you've had?
I know we haven't at this point.
Anybody else?
David, on the DOT side, I think we've taken probably a step beyond what the CDC initially has been proposing. With the amount of exposure potential we have, we had to get aggressive from the beginning. So we've set up employee hotlines where if anyone believes they may have been exposed to someone, they call the hotline, they get guidance. And if we have anyone that's deemed to be a person B exposure, meaning, you know, they had a critical exposure to someone who likely tested positive, we put those in a 14-day quarantine. And then if that's the case, if it's been confirmed, we go ahead and do an enhanced cleaning of the facility with a third-party vendor. You know, ordinarily we were trying to do it with just our own cleaning staff, but then just for our own peace of mind, as well as the peace of mind of our staff, we felt it appropriate to step up and go with these third-party vendors to come in and clean.
Okay.
And David, that would be a question that I think a lot of folks might have. He just said that if a family member was ill and then you would quarantine your employee for 14 days, if that's gonna be the policy or not, because I did read where I thought the CDC loosened that up and said that a guy could come back to work as long as he didn't have a fever and he wore a mask and things. So maybe that's something you could look into.
Well, that's part of these special guidelines, especially if you've had somebody exposed, to allow them to continue to do the critical infrastructure work.
Yeah, David, you know, we struggled with that, but, you know, everything that we did on the state side, you know, our staffing reductions and the aggressive posture we've taken as far as having folks quarantine, it's really all about readiness for us. You know, there's a cost to any sort of readiness posture that you have, and our position is we need to be ready for critical response, whether it's a snow and ice storm, whether it's a thunderstorm, whether it's to support you know, Lake Ontario water levels or to support this COVID-19 response. We need to be prepared for that, and we can't be prepared if we lose entire shops due to an exposure. So we're taking this aggressive posture just to make sure we are able to be prepared to respond 24/7.
That's a great point. I felt that way since the beginning of this whole thing.
Okay. Yep. So that leads in. Well, actually, I did have a question in the pod just quickly. Have any of the panelists had an employee contract COVID-19?
One of my foreman's two adult children had it. So we had him quarantined for the 14 days. He didn't come to work.
Okay.
We've had a couple tests positive, but we've quarantined them for 15 days before they came back. Nobody's contracted it.
Okay.
David, just for reference, you know, we've had a few folks test positive that work for the department. We're not aware of any contamination that we've shared with other employees as a result because of our aggressive posture, but just, you know, by the sheer nature, the size of our staff, we have had 23 test positive.
Okay. So next question that we had, what work are you delaying or canceling for 2020? In light of all the economic and other staffing concerns, what work have you decided you're just not going to get done this year?
In the town of Clarence, I know, you know, we received a memo last week from Town Hall, you know, with the anticipation of the sales tax revenue coming in low. Everybody's been asked to cut back 10%, all the department heads. It probably affect us more so because we do have paving projects and things like that in the pipeline that we've been working on all winter long. At this point, am not ready to throw the towel in, but I realize that some of the stuff's going to have to be limited. But you know, we're really planning. We were planning on one of our best summers ever. But when I look at the big picture, if I did have to cut 10, 20, even 30% out, I would concentrate on doing a really good job at some of the things that we haven't been able to do because we've been so busy paving. So I'm trying to look at the silver lining and the rosy side of that. If we're not able to do paving, maybe there's some other, you know, the tasks that don't cost a lot of money, brush removal, cutting intersections back, things like that we can concentrate on. But I think we're all going to feel the pinch. We've mentioned that a few times, but there's no sense in crying over it. We got to do what we got to do. And I think there's a lot we can do, sign work, things like that we could just do better than we're able to do under the typical workload of the summer.
We're going to be cutting our paving projects by 30 to 50%, and our bridge maintenance probably by about the same. With less people, we weren't going to be able to do the tree work and brush work we normally do for opening up the roadways and some of the drainage work. So what we decided, we had set up, similar to Jim, to have a banner year, and we worked with the asphalt companies to get a jump on our paving work. So with that being off, with probably running at about 50% staff for 3 months this summer, we're going to jump onto the tree work and try to get that caught up, so we'd only be lagging with paving next year. And I think that's what we're all going to be faced with because of the loss of sales tax revenues and maybe even property tax money put off for folks not paying. All of our municipalities at every level are going to be struggling to close the budget gap.
Yeah, we're here in Orleans County. We're taking a kind of what I'm calling a smart conservative approach to our capital projects as well as just normal projects this year. We're finishing up a few paving projects that we didn't get completed last year. So we're trying to, we'll get those wrapped out, but I think we're going to focus on some of the stuff that's not going to cost a lot of money, ditching, peeling shoulders, a lot of that maintenance work that kind of gets put off because we're so busy with the other capital projects typically during this time of year. So it'll give us an opportunity to really catch up on some of the other work that gets pushed off, kicked down the road. Here in my county, we're going back to full staff starting tomorrow. The legislature has determined that anybody sitting at home, basically on COVID, what we call COVID leave, is no longer going to be paid. So I'm bringing my crews back, and we're going to be full force doing what we can, but trying to be smart about the money that we're spending. So we're trying to pick projects that aren't going to, spend money at this point until we really get a better handle on the the impacts of the, reduced sales tax revenue and any other state aid cuts that might come down the road.
David, we're going back to full crew Monday, and we plan to accomplish most of what we had planned. As you might know, the town receives $2.5 million a year from the casino, which is closed. So we have a little revenue problem there. We don't share sales tax in Sullivan County, so that's not an issue for the towns. But I think the pain from this could come in the coming years when I heard mention foreclosures and counties will have to make towns whole, and so we're going to be a little careful and take a wait and see attitude as see if the economy comes back. But on the town level, I mean, we're fully funded for this year, but we're more worried about next year and the year after.
So, David, a little factoid. We were looking at this yesterday. About 254 towns don't get sales tax.
Okay.
So there's 254 that should have a budget in place already.
And so I'm assuming that's the kind of thing you're going to be talking about in your session this afternoon?
Yes.
So somebody had asked us to put the link up. I looked at the link. It's a little complicated. So I'm assuming you've got that in your Facebook page, Joel?
I do believe they do, yes.
And we'll make sure it's on our Facebook page as soon as we're done with this webinar as well. So you can get a link. You have to pre-register just like you had to pre-register for this.
David, I just want to mention one more thing. I told you we were issued a memo last week by our town hall. basically any capital projects that aren't in the pipeline already, and any major purchases are done. And I think that's something that the vendors and the truck guys and the equipment people are going to feel all summer long and until this is over. That's the real trickle down. The large purchases are decimated, and that's scary. But the other thing, as far as the sales tax is concerned, that comes in as revenue in different. It might not say in the town's budget books, amount from sales tax. It could come in as some other terminology like transfer from general. So you really have to, you got to read between the lines. And I would suggest everybody, especially the town and village people, make an appointment as soon as you possibly can and sit down with your administrators and your bookkeeper and try to get to the bottom line. Like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm going to plan for problems, but it may not be as bad for the town, the highway departments, because we have our own tax line, our own independent, line on the budget bill. Most of it is raised straight from tax revenue, and it's listed as that in our budget. So unless you directly get sales tax, it shouldn't be that horrible.
Okay. So someone made a comment that I thought was a pretty good one in the Q&A. They were talking about boom mowing being a great time to do boom mowing and other activities because of the obvious natural distancing. Is there any work we're doing extra because of the fact that we're social distancing? So things we might not do as much, we're actually doing more because of what's happening with COVID-19.
Yes, that's a good point. We were definitely doing more of that, and also like the little stupid things that we little chunks of blacktop here and there that are along the road edge that you don't normally may or may not pick up, or there might be at the end of somebody's driveway. Little things like that. We've been having people do that. So little housekeeping, extra housekeeping.
Yeah. They were just kind of rescheduling some of the things that we do in the process now. We're starting different sections of mowing at different times, and we're changing our schedule and replacing bridge joints and decks. That's something that everybody might want to take a look at, is kind of rescheduling certain tasks because of less traffic now.
Yeah, David, that's a great point. That's something that we're doing in the department as well. In addition to those tasks that we don't always have time to get to, there's also those tasks that might be nuisance related, but we just can't get to because there's so much traffic on those roadways. So we're looking to take advantage of those opportunities to get some crews out there to perform this work while the traffic volumes are at this reduced rate.
We're also going to crack seal some busy roads. And I would also make the point, David, that Jamie had a picture on in his town the other day of a person saying, "Oh, there's the highway department. Things are getting back to normal." So I think it's a good point for all of us to be out working in the public and being as helping people feel confident about things will get back to normal sooner than later.
Yeah, just to touch on that, I did, somebody tagged me in a post of our crew picking up brush in front of their house, and the caption was "Signs of Life." I think that, seeing the highway crews out, it's just like, in our town, it's like seeing the mailman or the school bus. We're part of the neighborhoods and we're part of people's daily lives. And it really is almost a reassurance that, spring's coming, we're here, and maybe we're at the beginning of the end for this whole situation. I think it's a real morale booster. That individual post that Rich referred to got a lot of, likes and shares and things like that. So, it's a positive thing. I'm glad we're out there and we're able to do it. So it's a good thing for people to see us. They like seeing us. We had an older gentleman yesterday who actually brought out some soda pop for our crews, which ordinarily would be a great treat for the guys, but obviously with all the COVID-19 stuff, they were very thankful, but quickly set it in the crew cabin and moved on with their work. So we're ready to get back at it.
And added to that, I mean, our industry is a huge part of the state's economy. So if we can move ahead with as many projects and get our CHIPS money spent, that would help things along also.
Rob, anything the DOT is doing special in that respect? Changing staffing, getting work done beyond normal?
Well, as I mentioned, we're looking to take advantage of the high traffic areas to get some work done, as well as, somebody mentioned using the over the rail mower. That's another great example. But I think the biggest thing we're doing is we're giving some attention to our high traffic areas. These, we've got some locations where it's nearly impossible to get to on a normal business day, whereas now we can get a crew out there and perform some necessary repairs.
Okay. We have one more question that we had sent out ahead of time, and then we'll look at some of the ones that are in the question and answer pod. So what is your current level of staffing? We've heard from most of you, but what is it? But just want to follow up on that. Where do you think you're going to be in the next few weeks and even over the summer?
Town of Clarence is at 50% right now, but we were completely shut down for really better part of 3 weeks. Going into 4 weeks, we were completely shut down. We just started up this past Monday, so we're 2.5 days into it at this point.
Erie County was down to 25%. We rotated a third on and then 2 weeks off, rotated that way. Now we're just under 50%, and we're probably going to be in that range until the 1st of August, at least.
Yeah, here in Orleans County, we were at 50% staff. Broke my crew up into 2 teams, alternating, 1 week on, 1 week off. Like I said earlier, as of tomorrow, we're going to be back full staff.
Town of Thompson was closed for 3 weeks on call. We did work 1 snowstorm, and we had a few small call-ins. We've been 50% for this is the 3rd week, and on Monday, we're going to go back to full staff.
Yeah, David, on the state side, we were started out at a 2/3 reduction, but as we're easing into our summer program here, some of our crews have gone back to full staffing just because we need to have a minimum size just to put a crew together to get some of our specialized work done. But in the coming days, we're really looking to put together a plan to where we can begin phasing into more full-time crews. We need to be creative. We realize that we still need to get some social distancing because we don't want to have any increased exposures, but we need to adjust our schedules in such a way that we can increase our hours and get some work done without really increasing our exposure to our crews. And things we're looking at, just like most of the other municipalities are, I'm sure they're talking about, we're looking at doing some 10-hour days. We're looking at the potential of going to a 6 or possibly even a 7-day-a-week schedule to allow our crews to work opposite days. Various things of that nature, staggering our crews, their start times, so they're not really crossing paths at the beginning, at the end of the day. Like I think it was James has mentioned. I agree. That's our biggest liability, is at the beginning and the end of the day. So if we can stagger our shift times a little bit, maybe we can still get that necessary work done and still not have our crews.
Okay. Anybody else want to follow up? Okay, we've got some questions in the question and answer pod I wanted to go through. We've had some suggestions about other work people could be doing, such as stocking your sand pile was one that came in. What are you doing about inspections and having consultants coming on the jobs, especially at the state level, but any jobs? So what are you doing about activities like that?
Well, David, on the state side, it's going to be business as usual. You know, we need to inspect our operations. You know, we can do things with social distancing as much as possible, and we're going to treat them, you know, the same way we would treat our own staff employee, as far as making sure our inspectors and our temporary inspectors, as well as our consultant inspectors, have the appropriate PPE, you know, to help protect against exposures.
We haven't canceled any consultant or vendor project as yet in our county. I have spoken with all of them on the phone, and they all have social distancing and, you know, COVID plans, so to speak, in place for their workers and that type of thing. So as we're out and come across them out the field, we'll be observing the same. That may come during this temporary layoff period, that we don't do the amount of work we had planned on or are currently planning on. That's still up in the air a little bit.
Dave, as far as inspections are concerned, I have a crew chief that does inspections from home. He never checks into the highway at all. He just emails me and says it was done. And he meets with, you know, contractors or whatever, but he leaves from home, does his inspections, and goes back home. And that actually has worked out fairly well for us. Just having people drive their own personal vehicles, be it we have to pay a little mileage or whatever. We haven't done that yet, but if we had to, it wouldn't be the end of the world to keep people safe.
Is there, by the way, Jamie, before I forget, are you paying that employee to drive to the sites? How are you doing?
Well, in the crew chief's case, he has an assigned vehicle, a take-home vehicle. Friday, we had no staff in last week. We had a farmer call us at 12:30 on Friday and said he was going to work his field on the very next day. We have a great crew here. Logistically, we were trying to figure it out. And what was actually suggested by one of our employees, I wish I could take credit for it. He said, why doesn't everybody just drive there? So we had 10 employees drive their personal vehicles, put their flashers on the side of the road. And we were able to get a couple one-ton dump trucks over there to haul the supplies back to the yard, and we just left it there. So that's kind of what happened there. We honestly wouldn't want to do that every day, but you know, we had a small window to get this stuff picked up, and that's what we had to do. And that's how this whole COVID thing's been going. You got to do what you got to do, and try to be safe doing it.
So one last question, and then I'll give folks a chance to say a last comment. Can you use short-term disability for workers who have underlying medical issues that cannot be at work? Has anybody run across that particular issue?
I guess, you know, here we don't have short-term disability. Any unused sick leave, you know, above a certain amount of hours gets put in a bank, and that's kind of used as your short-term, you know, disability gap until long-term disability kicks in. So I'm not really sure how we would address that.
Okay. So I guess I'll give folks a last chance. Is there any comments, anything you wanted to say about essential work and your activities that you haven't discussed? We'll go around. Anybody want to say something?
I would just thank you, David, for hosting these things, and it's been a great asset to me to hear how everybody else is doing. So thank you all.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty much in the same boat. It seems like, you know, with a few variations here and there, I think we're all pretty much operating, you know, somewhat similar, you know, to each other. I just say, if anybody's got questions or concerns, just reach out to, you know, your local towns and villages and counties and stuff within your area, and just see what they're doing. And, you know, somebody might have figured out the answer to your question already, but you know, the lack of communication, you know, has probably grown a little bit more through this isolation period. Everybody's kind of staying to their own, operating in very tiny groups and stuff. So I think the line of communication really still needs to be left open, and everybody working together.
So I'm going to throw a hook. I'm going to throw a hook out there for later today. Sorry, Bob, didn't mean to interrupt. So state and highway town laws, that when the town supervisor creates a emergency, local emergency, does that give the town supervisor authority over the town highway superintendent? And we're going to answer that question later today.
So
Good.
for those who can't find it or don't do Facebook, I know some of you said you do not, you go to the Town Superintendents Association, just search for New York Town Highways, and you'll find it on the web. Or you can go to our page and get the link. Just go in the search box and type Zoom webinar, and it'll come right up the top of the list, and you can register and sign up there. And it's this afternoon at 1 o'clock.
Hey, David, I just want to add again, thank you, for the department to invite us to this panel. I think it's an excellent conversation, and I know it's reassuring for us just to hear that, we're all relatively on the same page here across the state. I just want to add another reminder, if there are any needs for PPE out there, to please go through your county emergency manager, as well as any needs for hand sanitizer. Also get those to your emergency manager. There's been a robust distribution of hand sanitizer across the state, and we're continuing to do deliveries daily on that. That's all I have, David.
That's good. Thank you. John, anything from the village side?
The only thing I'd add, I just want to thank everyone for their service to their communities, and I agree with everything that was said as it relates to it. The public really enjoys seeing the crews out there. It's reassuring to them, and just don't forget about the mental health aspect of it, and just watch our people, because they need a lot of support. We all need support.
Yep. So just a couple of last things. If you're looking for more information about what's going on with COVID, we do have a webpage called the Information Highway, which has a lot of information on it. Just go to our website. It's right at the top. It has links to all the materials we produced, the tech tip we did on the essential work that followed on today's town hall, a survey we did of what departments are doing around the state. And over the next week, in addition to the thing this afternoon from the town superintendents, we have other webinars coming up on geometric design for road signs, again, trying to get back to normal. We'll talk to you hopefully next Monday on our bumper banter. And next week, we're doing a Stump the Engineer session. So send us the most difficult questions you've got. You can see if you can stump Jeff and I. And we may actually arrange one of those with one of our legal staff in the future as well. Maybe we could get your legal folks to help us, Joel. That'd be pretty fun.
Okay.
And we'll bring John in as well. With that, got a couple of minutes. Can give folks a last chance. Otherwise, we'll sign off and wish everybody a good day, and stay safe and stay well. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, David.